Hi everyone, my name is Robbie Brookman and I'll be doing my current event presentation on marketing independent movies for success anywhere. So we're going to start off with what is an independent movie. Independent movies in the industry are referred to as indie movies, and these are movies that have been filmed and produced outside the scope of major film studios. So these aren't going to be produced by your big film studios like Marvel or Disney, and because they're produced, distributed, and filmed by independent entertainment companies. And typically they always have a much lower budget. On average, independent movies budgets are around $2 million or less, but people make independent movies even off of around $10,000. That just requires the filmmaker to take on a lot of the responsibility themselves and have friends working for them for free and pulling a lot of strings, let's say. But one benefit of not being in a big film studio is that the creator of the movie is actually in much more control of the movie, and you're able to actually see the full vision of what the filmmaker wants you to see. And independent movies don't really have any genre per se. It's really just whatever the filmmaker would like it to be. So here I got some examples of some of the most successful independent movies to come out over the years. We got Pulp Fiction, which was actually produced and directed by Quentin Tarantino, and it's actually a pretty good example of how a smaller production with an independent studio can help revive a career. And in this case, it was John Travolta, and even Samuel L. Jackson was in that movie. And then we got Bonnie and Clyde, and this came out in the 60s and was a revolutionary movie when it came out back in the day. We got Napoleon Dynamite, which I hope we've all seen. That movie is absolutely hilarious. And we got Jaws, and Jaws is a personal favorite of mine out of this group. I always loved Jaws growing up, and I actually got to see it in theaters for the 40th anniversary back a few years ago. And I always loved the ride at Universal Studios for Jaws. But now looking back on all these movies, even though they were made with an independent studio and may not have had as big of a budget as some of the other movies, they're still absolute classics to this day. So the biggest issue that independent filmmakers face is a lack of funding, and this ends up creating a variety of issues for them down the road. One of which is it can be very hard to land big name actors for independent films, and this is simply due to the big difference in pay. For example, Marvel, when they produced Avengers Endgame back in 2019, they had a budget of $365 million to spend, so they're able to offer their actors multi-million-dollar deals to be in those roles. Whereas if you remember what I said earlier, the average for an independent film budget is only about $2 million or less. So realistically, these independent filmmakers can't offer these actors even $1 million because of how many actors they'll need in the film. And I can't blame them with that big of a gap in the pay. And another downside of this lack of funding is that there really isn't much of a marketing budget. And one thing I also noticed is that a lot of these independent filmmakers don't have that great of a social media presence. So next we're going to talk about the marketing of an independent movie. And as I said before, there's typically a very small budget in general for independent movies, and this ends up leading to a small marketing budget as well. And one thing that can help is having big Hollywood stars, but as I said previously, it can be tough to get these stars, so it's not truly necessary. There are plenty of young aspiring actors who will take smaller roles in a movie for less money, and they may be just as good. But if you are able to land one of the big Hollywood stars, that does end up bringing a lot more attention to your independent film and just gets it a lot more recognized, and people will be more intrigued to watch it. And for the marketing of an independent movie, you must make a trailer for the movie. If you don't make a trailer, no one's going to click on it, and that trailer will hopefully be viewed by a lot of people and entice them to watch the full movie. And in my opinion, independent filmmakers must use social media. I see that as a huge opportunity for them to build an audience around themselves and their movies. And typically, but prior to the release of the movie, these independent filmmakers will bring them to film festivals, whether that's local, national, or even international. And then based on how it's perceived at those film festivals, they'll kind of decide how they'd like to distribute the movie and if they'd like to change anything. As far as the distribution goes, they try and go for typically in theaters, but most of the time it ends up just being a limited release because they don't have enough money to keep it in theaters that long. So it typically will end up on streaming platforms or something like that. So next we're going to talk about how these independent filmmakers can improve their marketing techniques. Personally, I believe that incorporating social media even more into their marketing techniques will be very beneficial to them, but I don't mean paying for advertising on social media. I mean actually using social media to the filmmaker's advantage and creating a presence and a fan base behind the filmmaker themselves. I believe they should be posting consistently and trying to create a fan base for themselves, and that'll be somewhere that they can post all of the things that they're working on and post to people who are passionate about their work. And I believe they should make use of Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and TikToks. And by this, they could create little teasers of just little snippets and just make those into these short videos, because these short form videos are absolutely popping off right now. The algorithms on all of these platforms are crazy. They can make something go from no views one day to viral the next. At least once a day I get little snippets of whether it's a TV show or a movie. They'll pop up on my Instagram or my YouTube. I don't have TikTok, so I don't get any on there, but on my YouTube Shorts and my Instagram Reels, I get a lot of little snippets from TV shows or movies that pop up, and they end up sparking an interest in my brain, and I end up looking up the show and kind of determining if I want to watch that or not. And if they do start to gain a fan base, then that would open them up to, they could start a Patreon. And for those of you who don't know what a Patreon is, it's basically like a paid monthly subscription, and the consumer will actually pick how much they want to spend per month. Typically it's tiered out into a bottom, middle, and then a high tier, and however much you spend kind of determines what content you'll be able to see. But I can see this being an immense benefit for a filmmaker, because who wouldn't want to see a movie prior to its release? I would probably pay monthly to see that. And this can all be done at a very low cost to the filmmaker, really, if any, because they're the one making the film. So it is easy enough for them to create a little snippet and just put it right onto their Instagram. As long as they're consistent, they'll be able to build a nice, trustworthy fan base who's passionate about them and their work, as long as it's good content. So in conclusion, independent movies aren't produced by your typical big name studios such as Marvel. They are filmed and produced and distributed by independent entertainment companies, and they typically have a much lower budget than these big name studio movies. And that is their biggest issue, is the lack of funding, and that creates a lot of other issues for them down the road, whether that's lack of funding for marketing or they can't get big name actors, but they can still create great quality movies with this low budget. And with the use of traditional marketing, digital marketing, and social media marketing, I believe that these independent filmmakers can still make a big wave, even compared to these big studio names. And I wanted to thank you guys for watching, and I'll leave you guys with my question, which is, in what ways can independent filmmakers improve their marketing techniques? Again, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great night.